and he has to establish again to bring in people who are not from these movements,
Yeah.
because they especially of course also because of the penury of priests. We have not enough priests, but there are enough people. It would anyway be necessary to minimize the curia. It's much too big for a lot of nonsense. I think half of the people at present would be enough. And he would, I mean, he has not to revenge,
Yeah.
but he has to establish new people who are not from these movements.
For you, if the popes try to really reform the curia and the government of the church, the most important, the first he has to do for you is what? If he thinks we have 10 reforms to do, but maybe we cannot only make
First
4 or
is
5.
to appoint a good Secretary of State and a good private secretary, as mentioned already.
Yeah.
And he would have to have a cabinet of really experienced people, of competent people, not only those who were, coming up through the hierarchy and persona grata or persona ingrata. Just because they were persona grata, they are not the prefect of a congregation. He would have to appoint really competent people to these congregations or ministries, dicasteria, and to bring those people together, not to have something like a cabinet that they meet every week, to discuss the things together, and not as they do it now. Everybody makes, especially important is a third person. He has to appoint a man in the Holy Office, the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith,
Yeah.
who has an open theology, and not as the present German Müller, who was the bishop who had the minimum of sympathy among his own people, and then was appointed because he was a friend of Ratzinger.
Yeah. Another thing, regarding the moral issues like celibacy, the role of the women in the church, even the homosexual couples, all that, what do you expect from the new Pope? Do you think he's going to change anything?
Well, I do not expect that he would adapt to everything. I don't think we need a Pope who says yes to every modern development.
Yeah.
There are certainly modern developments which have to be criticized. And we need, I think, a Pope who uses the rules of St. Ignatius, Distinctio Spirituum, of spirits, to see what is good and what is not good. He would have to show in sexual matters a reasonable way in the middle, not a rigorism, a moral rigorism, but also not a moral libertinism.
Yeah.
And I think he should write a good encyclical on sexuality on this middle road, and then to make a distinction, for instance, in the question of anti-conception, not to say it doesn't matter with whom a person has sexual intercourse, just promiscuity, but on the other hand, to allow the partners to decide whether they want to have children or not children, how much. So they should decide about the pill and to declare anti-conception as sin as such is certainly was a big mistake of Pope Paul VI in his encyclical Humane Vitae, and this should be revised. That's one example. Also with regard to abortion, I think nobody can expect that the Pope would accept abortion under any circumstance. Abortion is not a means for avoid, abortion is not a method of birth control. But in urgent cases, it must be allowed. It must be allowed.
Okay.
And the same also in other questions. For instance, homosexuality, I think it needs an acknowledgement that a civil registration of partners should be should also be allowed by the Church. But it's a disputed question whether these partners should have children adopted. I think he would not have to agree with that. So you see everywhere distinctio spiritum.
Okay. The new Pope says that he wants a poor church for the poor people. What does he means when he talks about the poor church? We know what is poor people, what is a poor church.
But poverty as such is not an ideal, poverty as such. I think we are interested that especially in Latin America and in all the big megalopolis, that we find methods to help the people to get over the level of poverty. So that's the first thing. We have to work and to fight for a better, for the well-being of people. What was the preferential option for the poor was that the church in Latin America and elsewhere has not just to be on the side of the establishment. That is the problem. And I think people who are in the establishment must acknowledge that the church is allowed to protest against certain abuses and certain social, against misery, and the church has to be the advocate of the poor people. That doesn't mean that it has to be only for poor people, but to have a preferential option for those to help them.
Okay. Do you think that if he tries to really reform the church, that the church needs a new concilium?
Can you repeat?
If the church, the Catholic Church, needs a new concilium now, and to do what?
Well, there are different possibilities. I think first he could do certain things himself, alone. For instance, he could say, I would like to have a free discussion on the problem of celibacy. That he can, a second possibility, he could have in the central administration a discussion with the other competent people and to make certain decisions out of a smaller circle in the central administration, but competent people, not only cardinals who are not competent. And the third possibility is a council, who has also not to be necessarily the council of all the 5,000 bishops, more or less, nearly 5,000 bishops coming all together, but of representatives of the bishops. But representatives who are elected by, not appointed from above, but elected from below. as a matter of fact, the Episcopal Council, the Synod of Bishops, was meant by this. The people in the council wanted to have a Synod of Bishops. They wanted to have a condecisive, corresponsible people, not only people who, not an advisory council, They should really be able to make decisions together with the Pope, not against the Pope, but together with the Pope, to make certain decisions on these important issues.
What do you need in the film? We had Yacuria, Monsignor Romero.
Yeah.
What do you think? They came from the theology of deliberation. So, what do you think the new Pope should do with those people similar as you and people and the bishops in Latin America who are a little bit aside of the church because they came from the theology of deliberation?
I am, of course, I was a friend of El Yacuria. We met him in Spain, as a matter of fact, the last time before he was murdered again. And I think there are a lot, and I am a friend of Leonardo Boff. I was I'm a friend of the founder of the Theology of Liberation of the Peruvian, what is his name? Gustavo Gutierrez. And I think all those learned also from the different political situation today. I think under some of them were too much fascinated by Marxism, too much. They were no Marxists, but they had great sympathy with Fidel Castro and others. And I think today we need a democratic system. The positive development in Latin America is that they got rid of the military dictators, and I think liberation theology could help, as I have shown in the film, to have really vivid and living communities, not in the way of party politics. I think theologians are not to make a party politics, but to help really to fight poverty and to fight for a better government. All this is, of course, important. I think I would have to say here an important argument for that. There are as you know, millions of people in Latin America are going to Protestant Pentecostal churches because there they have a community, they are helped by other people, they can sing together, they can have their own representatives and so on. And if the Catholic Church still remains this hierarchical church, that's a so big difference. You know, if you see a Latin Mass, if you see an official Mass today, even if it is in vernacular, but that is often so boring. And I think we need a living, vivid liturgy. We need community, we need warmth, we need emotions. All this, I think, is possible only if we have again a functioning pastoral structure. If you have 20,000 people with one pastor, what can you do? And in order to have more pastors, we have to abolish the law of celibacy and to ordain women.
Yeah, that's.
How can you take a young man? Why should a young man, let us say a good student, be attracted to a profession who forbids marriage and who is authoritarian. These are the two things. Young people today are not, they want to have a free choice for their partner, and they would not like to be just subservient,
No.
you know, and if we do not change that, we shall have no peace.
Yeah. I'm going to change. You proposed in the...
And I think it's very important that you mentioned somewhere, if the new Pope prays now pity, misericordia, he has to extend pity not only to those poor and simple people he likes to talk to, he has to see that there are a lot of people, for instance, that priests need pity, misericordia. If they want to marry, they should marry. As St. Paul said, it's better not to burn.
Yeah.
And he should have pity with the divorced people who would like to go to the sacraments. He has to have pity with those people who are in another church and they would like to go together to the same Eucharist. All this would be a consequence of pity.
Okay. In the new global ethic, you propose to make possible the dialogue and better relations between different religions. You propose a dialogue to make the relations between the different religions better.
Religious, yes.
Yeah. What can the new Pope do to improve the relations between the religions, even especially with the Muslim and with the Jews?
Well, first he has to show sympathy for these people. I have a lot of relations with Jewish and Muslim persons, but I remember when I was at in the Gulf region, because Joseph Ratzinger as Pope made this unfortunate, Ratisbon speech, they said, he does not like us. He does not like us. That was the opposite of John the 23rd. You know, he showed first that he loves the Jews. The first gestures of Papa Roncalli, John the 23rd, were very simple. He stopped at the synagogue when he saw they coming out from the synagogue, and just stopped the car and greeted them.
Yeah, just that. Yeah.
Accepted them as brothers. And he said, I am Giuseppe, I am Joseph, your brother. So a Pope should show sympathy for them. And then he should also acknowledge what I acknowledged in my last thing, what you have seen in the film, and you have it in the book, what is common to Christians and Muslims and Jews. He should make it clear that we have practically the same ancestors. We have a lot of common vision of history, and the elements I mentioned, which you find in the book, this should also become conscious for the people. And then what is especially important, what I mean with global ethic, he should make it clear that there are ethical standards which were shared by Jews, Christians, Muslims, and even by people of the Indian and Chinese tradition. Global ethic, ética mundial, you say in Spanish probably, ética mundial.
Ética mundial.
Ética mundial, according to what we propose in the Declaration of the Parliament of the World's Religions in 1993, you have it also quoted somewhere here, is precisely everybody can keep his faith. A Jew can remain a Jew, a Muslim can remain a Jew, an atheist can remain an atheist. But we have to agree on certain very elementary ethical standards. Not to murder, not to lie, not to steal, not to abuse sexuality. There's four, and especially the golden rule: don't do to others what you do not have done for yourself. And as a basis of everything, the rule of humanity: treat every human being in a truly human way, not in an not in an inhuman way, not in a bestial way. These are 6 principles of a global ethic which are very elementary standards, but of course very challenging standards for a culture of non-violence, reverence for life, don't kill, for a culture of justice and a just economic order, don't steal, for a culture of honesty and truthfulness, don't lie, and for a culture of partnership of men and women, don't abuse sexuality. You would probably find these elements also in the Indios, among the Indios. You know, the human being had to learn to behave as a human being, not to kill other people, other human beings like animals. And so these 4 rules are practically a consequence of the human being who, through the ages, coming out of the animal world, who you will also find it here on ethnic religions, coming out of the animal world, they had to protect life, not to murder. They had to protect property, not to steal. They had to protect truth, not to lie, and to protect sexual relations, not to abuse sexuality. All this is very, very human, and we have in German-speaking countries already a lot of things for school, in the schools, even for the kindergarten. Already in the kindergarten, children should learn not to do to others what you do not have done to yourself. I think if you have so much violence in Latin America, especially Mexico, that is because these people did not learn the most easiest things, most elementary things of humanity, not to kill other people, and we have to educate the children in a new way, and that is why we make a lot of work in our foundation for a global ethic. We have a lot of instruments now, films, books, and we are making big progress. But in the English-speaking world, we have now in Bogota, the man who is very good is Carlos Paz, who is working for that, and slowly we are also teaching. We are also making progress in Latin America.
I would like to change to ask you, what do you think, your opinion about the years of Cardinal Ratzinger as Pope? About these last 8 years?
You mean a judgment about his pontificate?
Yeah.
Well, he has certainly done his ordinary obligations and ordinary tasks he has done in a very dignified and, I think, very serious way. I think he is certainly not the person who was involved. He's certainly not the man who was involved in these intrigues. He was a little too much aloof. And he liked to write books. I also like to write books, but I remained a professor. And he had many years, he did not write books where he had time. And I think it was a mistake to write books as a pope. he was not able to control the machinery of the Curia. He did not govern, non-governor. They said in the Curia, non-governor. He let the things go,
Yeah.
and so he is co-responsible for a lot of bad things in the Curia, and I think he will especially be remembered that he resigned as Pope.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think it was a good decision.
But do you think it was a good decision because he was not doing the job he had to do, or for you it's something more like because it's something new since a lot of centuries?
Well, first, his health was really bad, and I think it was good not to follow the example of the Polish Pope, who celebrated his sickness and dying before television. That was, for a lot of people, very...
No, I didn't like.
So that was... but second, he said it himself, he was very depressed by all what happened in scandals, and I think especially the sexual abuses in the whole church, and of course his co-responsibility in covering up the sexual matters. As cardinal and head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, he himself has written in 2001 a formal solemn letter to consider this as a secreto pontificio. That means with high degree of covering up. And I think then Vatileaks was a second element after sexual matters. He saw that the corruption in the Curia was very extended, and it will now be one task of the new Pope to read the secret report 3 cardinals made to the Pope directly and for his successor. That is probably also the reason why I want to have time for new appointments. He must study that, and I think he will see not very good things in this report.
And
well, I think you have a lot of other questions, I think.
yeah, it's like sometimes people talk about something like that the people who is in the role like a president of a government or the Pope or people like that are a little bit lonely when you have too much power.
Yes.
You are a little bit lonely. And you met Ratzinger in Rome, and you were with him some hours. Do you think he was lonely, like alone there?
Well, at the beginning he was in a very good mood. We had a very gentle discussion as we have it now with you. You know, we were talking to each other as colleagues, and I think I was happy that he was happy in Castel Gandolfo with his beautiful view on the cupola of St. Peter's and on the lake, and I think at the beginning he was in a very good mood. But I hoped that he would find the right way to make a turn again away from his restoration politics he followed with the Polish Pope, and to go on for a way of innovation in the light of the Second Vatican Council. And I expect he would find the strength to do it, but he did not. And I think so the things got worse and worse. Wie viel Uhr haben wir denn?
Jetzt haben wir 3:10. Ich wollte Sie gerade fragen, weil die Frau Wanner wollte gerne noch ein paar Sachen unterschreiben lassen von Ihnen und so.
Yeah, the secretary is waiting.
That's
done. One or two last questions.
Just two more questions. The first is the balance of the power in the world is changing. Europe is losing influence and power, even the United States a little bit, and Latin America and Asia are rising. And a pope from the south could, in a way, move the church, move the power of the church to the south. Do you think it's possible?
Well, I think that the weight of the other continents become more and more now visible. And I am happy that we are not so Eurocentric. And I hope also in his appointments he will show that Ratzinger also made the mistake to make 28 Italian cardinals. It was crazy. And I think he will, hopefully, have a polycentric view of the world. But I think it would be stupid to forget that Europe has still a very great intellectual power and also spiritual power. It's not the sign that a lot of people do not go to the church anymore. It's not because they are not anymore pious in their own way, but they do not like this system. You are so write everything you want about that.
And last question.